Family, on tonight we're going to start a four-part study that causes us to examine very carefully a question that many have asked. That question being, why? Unfortunately, when people ask why, the response tends to be, why not? I am absolutely convinced that why not is generally not an acceptable answer because God works in his divine providence and purpose. So there's always a reason for what God allows and what God does not allow. As we talk about our lives and consider the things of our own existence, we often ask why. Tonight we will look at one of four possible reasons that can help us to understand the answer to why. Let me preface this by saying that tonight's study will not necessarily be the most favorable of the four lessons, but are certainly lessons that need to be considered. In so doing, I want you to turn to Jeremiah chapter 11, and we'll look at verses 9 through 12. Again, Jeremiah chapter 11, verses 9 through 12. When we answer the question why, it helps us to have a perspective. It helps us to have clarity. It helps us to have context. It helps us to get understanding. Many people have been condemned for wanting to know why. Tonight we want to start understanding that it's okay to ask why, especially when we come to the right conclusions behind that question. As you're turning to Jeremiah chapter 11, I want to ask you, have you ever thanked a parent or grandparent for punishing you? Remember timeouts, standing in the corner? Remember losing a privilege, not being able to go outside and play? You can't have company or friends over. No TV, no video games. Those things made us miserable at the time. Yet, as we mature, we come to appreciate discipline. As we look at Jeremiah chapter 11, we see just that God's discipline to his people. In Jeremiah 11, starting at verse 9, the Lord said unto me, a conspiracy is found among the men of Judah and among the inhabitants of Jerusalem. They are turned back to the iniquities of their forefathers, which refused to hear my words, and they went after other gods to serve them. The house of Israel and the house of Judah have broken my covenant, which I have made with their fathers. Therefore, thus saith the Lord, behold, I will bring evil upon them, which they shall not be able to escape. And though they shall cry unto me, I will not hearken unto them. Then shall the cities of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem go and cry unto the gods unto whom they offer incense, but they shall not save them at all in the time of their trouble. In this particular passage, we see Jeremiah speaking as a reference to the punishment that God was going to give Judah. Judah, according to verses 7 and 8, had not learned from their forefathers. There was enough evidence in the past to help them to see that God is not only a God of love and grace, but he's also a God of discipline, a God of chastisement. And they, according to verse 11, were going to be subjected to God's wrath. As we think about the character of God, again, we can think about all of the flowery, favorable things about him. But we must also remember that chastisement is very much a part of his character, just as him blessing us is a part of his character. Have you ever noticed that people will brag about God has blessed me because he gave me something, he delivered me from an enemy, he allowed me to prosper in my health? But you never hear anybody bragging about God disciplining them, chastising them, getting their attention. The reason why the Lord chastises us is because there are eternal consequences for sin. And He wants us to suffer earthly consequences for sin in hopes that it will correct our behavior to keep us from the eternal consequences of sin. Let me repeat that. There are eternal consequences for sin. God allows us and even wants us to suffer earthly consequences for sin because He does not want us to have to suffer the eternal consequences of sin. You see, punishment serves three purposes. Number one, to bring about awareness. If we're never punished, we are never aware of what we've done wrong or what we're guilty of because of what we didn't do that we should have done. So the awareness brings about an informed mind. The second reason for a punishment is to make us accountable. Do you know if we're never punished, we'll never have a conscience? So it is not only to inform our mind, but it is to shape our conscience. And third, punishment is to bring about change in behavior, which means God wants to impact our actions. So from awareness to accountability to actions, punishment actually serves a holy purpose. You've heard me say so often that God is not interested necessarily in your happiness. He's interested in your holiness. He wants you to be happy, don't get me wrong. But holiness is God's standard for all of us. And He'll be happy when you're holy, and you'll be happy when He's holy. As we look at our lives, we ought to want to be the very best version of ourselves that we can be. Let us not be like Judah, subjected to the wrath of God. The next time you go through something, you may want to ask yourself, is God punishing me? Is God trying to make me aware of something? Is He trying to make me more accountable? Or is He trying to change my actions? Because again, there are eternal consequences for sin. And so He allows earthly consequences, hoping that we're not subjected to eternal consequences. This has been another installment of A Few Minutes with the Minister.